Mike, maybe you should tell a little bit about yourself and then go into the presentation.
Yeah, I'm a congenital scientist. So.
I'm guessing it's not curable?
It's absolutely terminal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little over 20 years doing research in biology, and then a little over 10 years writing education materials for it. So, pretty long time in it, and then combine that with basically thinking from the age of about 6 that I thought science would be really cool. Except back then I thought you owned a Batmobile and all that. So.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I actually, it's funny, I have a hearing impairment, and I discover that people with hearing impairments often speak too quietly. It's because we don't know where we're pitching our voice. Mm-hmm. So, throw something at me, say something if I'm too quiet.
But he was wondering what you said. You said Batmobile is what he said.
Oh, I said when I was about like a little kid, thought I wanted to do science. Back then I thought that being a scientist meant you had like a Batmobile and all that cool stuff. Because all the scientists on TV, you know, they had everything.
Right.
So,
endless budgets.
Yeah. Very disappointed to discover it wasn't true. Oh. All right, so this is just one. There's some women in here that I know, probably some of you will recognize. There's one in there I'll be very surprised if you computer people don't know about.
Grace Hopper.
Spoiler alert.
That was, I figured as soon as I'm like, I don't know how many people there are, but that's one of the few I really know.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
She was something else.
Yeah. So there we go. Some of the great women in science. We're going to get started here. Here we go. It's just kind of a bit on the history. So everybody knows that most of the history women didn't have very many freedoms or opportunities outside of the home. And they also didn't usually have much chance at education. So that doesn't stop a few women from doing some pretty awesome things, not just in science. So I'm going to put a few up here. Literature, you probably recognize some of those names. Mm-hmm. Religion, if you know who Constantine, the first truly Christian emperor of Rome, that was his wife, and she was, I think, actually ahead of him in terms of leading the charge. Joan of Arc, of course. Art, Georgia O'Keeffe pops right out to me. Music, hopefully you know all of those. And then there's actually been some that have ruled nations and led armies.
Actually, the question about music.
Yeah.
There were no women in classical music at all?
Yes, there were. And I
You've only picked.
Yeah, no, I put the ones that are more well-known, but yes, there were. I can't remember which one it was. Might have been Schubert, whose wife did a lot of composing. And again, I'm not sure it's Schubert, but it was one of the well-known ones. But she did anything that got out into the world went under his name. Otherwise, I wanted to hear whatever a woman could make. Okay, first question. First off, how many female scientists can you name?
Curie.
Yep.
Comes to mind.
I was going to say Grace Hopper again.
Yeah.
That's
a giveaway.
Any others? She's not that famous of a scientist.
Didn't say anything about how many
Who's that?
famous.
So my sister-in-law is actually an evolutionary biologist, and she's up at they're up in Minneapolis, and there's a study that they've been a part of for the last several years. It's actually making it into college textbooks about a set of grasshoppers in Hawaii that have been evolving. There's a predator that's finding the males that chirp, because how these it's crickets. Crickets are finding mates by chirping. Well, there's a predator that's been killing off the males that chirp, and so the species has been evolving, and she's been involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
They no longer chirp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they chirp differently, maybe.
Chirp or something.
Yeah.
How do they attract?
I don't know the details, so we could always have her come out and talk at some point.
There you go. Okay, so the question, who's the greatest, is usually a pretty easy one for anybody to guess when you're talking about great women in science.
Who's the most spoken about is always
Of
Marie
course.
Curie.
Yes, the first lady of science.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I go through here, you're going to discover she's not just the best female scientist in history. She has a damn good case for being the best scientist flat out.
Yep.
She is undeniably in the top 5. So, some bits about her. She and her husband Pierre got the first Nobel Prize together, as many people know, isolating polonium and radium. So she's the first woman to get a prize, first couple to win a prize. Then she alone got a second Nobel Prize for her theory of radioactivity. So, I mean, we're talking really seminal stuff she was doing. So, the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, and one of only 5 so far. And the only one to get those 2 in 2 different areas of science. So,
How old was she when she died?
when she what?
Died.
There it is, 1867 to 34.
Oh, so she wasn't so
67.
Yeah,
That's
a reasonable lifetime, you know.
67.
That's what I said.
Especially for somebody who spent their lives doing unprotected work with
Yeah, right.
radiation.
She died from
She did
radiation.
pretty well.
Yeah.
Didn't she die from the radiation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I think, and I know her husband would have, but a horse cart got to him first.
Oh.
So, and he would have died sooner because he had a little pendant on his neck of radium. Yeah.
Because they didn't know that part yet.
They were starting to figure it out when the burns started showing up.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. There's a reason why she's the GOAT, the greatest of all time. First female full professor. We've already gotten to the first Nobel Prizes and 2 Nobel Prizes. Female professor at the Sorbonne, 8 major research prizes, medals, honorary titles out the wazoo. Since she's died, there are over 100 schools, university, and institutions that have her name, and I don't exactly know how many awards are named after her. Another case for the greatest. This is, whoops, there we go. Solvay Conference of 1927. This picture is sometimes called the most intelligent picture ever taken. You can see several names that you must recognize. There were 29 people at this conference. 17 of them either had or later would receive a Nobel Prize. It's a stunning percentage, but only one had 2 of them. None of those ever won 2. So, impressive lady.
Well, but there are some arguments about Einstein and whether he would have or should have, and why he didn't.
Yeah, that's he only won it for the photovoltaic effect, not for his theories of relativity, which is surprising. But he did get outshone by at least Niels Bohr, who only got 1, but managed to win a number of arguments with him.
You're talking about quantum.
What?
You mean in quantum mechanics?
Yeah.
Lost his argument, yeah.
Yeah, the old chaos theory, things are really chaotic, versus Einstein, God doesn't play dice. And Niels Bohr won that argument on the blackboard. All right, so here's the daughter of Marie and Pierre. This is Irene Curie. She and her husband Frederick received a Nobel Prize in chemistry just before the mother died, though they worked together earlier than that. So now, second woman to get a Nobel Prize, second couple to win one, first and only parents and daughter to get Nobel Prizes. So it's basically the Curies are just and by the way, she missed a second Nobel by a hair. She misinterpreted one little piece of data, and along came another scientist in the same field who looked at it and interpreted it correctly, published, and got the prize. So, real close. And so the Curies are ridiculously intelligent. They had a whole bunch of other, not Nobels, but very top scientists. The only other Nobel in the family was a Nobel Peace Prize some years later. But you look at their family tree, it's ridiculous to see the brain power. Right there.
I would challenge that that's just a question of brain power.
What's that?
I would challenge that that's just a question of brain power. There's also, I mean, it's just like Feynman. I mean, there are let's say cultural patterns or patterns within the personality that can get passed on.
Yeah.
That are really seminal to whether somebody is effective in
genetic
research.
curiosity.
It's not just
Or
to
learn
And how their
learned
family
curiosity.
background
They're
gives them.
raised.
Yeah.
It's a way of
Background.
organizing. Because I was a friend of a woman in England who at some point in her career was the chair of the London Mathematical Society, which is kind of the top tier. And I knew her. I mean, we were close for 10 years, and it was in her father was a physicist, her mother was a librarian. I mean, there are deep patterns of knowing how to study and how to set goals and kind of work towards them that I think are ultimately more important than intelligence. I mean, intelligence is important, there's no
Right.
question.
I
But there's
agree.
a point at which, did Einstein have a 160 or a 180? That's not the central point in how he got to where he was.
Yes. And I think it's kind of like both. If you're born into a family of people who are very smart, you do have some genetics that are probably there, but
Yep.
the atmosphere of home is going to make a big difference. For those who don't know, Niels Bohr's son, Ole, also won a Nobel. His grandson, Heinrich Bohr, I met him personally. He was a perfectly capable physicist, but nothing special. So there is also a little bit of how much of a noodle you've gotten. So Henrik was fine as a physicist, but he was never going to win any big prizes. So this is something about Irene, and with a little bit of help from Marie as well. They both worked on this, made some of the first portable X-ray units, and took them out into the battlefield in World War I. She taught doctors how to use them so that they could locate shrapnel to operate. Taught herself how to repair the thing.
What happened to the people who got X-rayed?
Who what?
Who actually were X-rayed?
Well, I suppose some of them survived, but I doubt they took a bunch of X-rays of them, so probably, plus it had been around since Roentgen, which was quite a while earlier, so there's probably been a little bit of work with it. Like not hitting them with too heavy a dose, which would also tend to wash out your results. But, I don't know, I didn't look up these soldiers. But for all this, she did get awarded by the military the President's Medal for Meritorious Service is the highest award a civilian can get for helping with the military. And, hey, she was an avowed atheist.
Hey.
So, viciously, she was a nurse in the battlefields, taught the doctors, how come I have this in the same thing a second time? Goodbye. Okay, next. Lisa Meitner. Less known by far. Yeah, but she was discovered a radioactive isotope, and together with her nephew, discovered and worked out the details of nuclear fusion. We all know what that led to, power and bombs. She would have gotten a Nobel Prize, but it went to her collaborator Otto Hahn to understand the background. He's German, she's Jewish. She started in Germany, she got the hell out of there, and he didn't put her name on it because there's no way you're going to put a Jew's name on your paper over there. So he got all the credit. Unfortunate, but what are you going to do?
Politics of the time.
Hmm?
It was the politics of the time.
Yeah, So,
Yeah.
yeah, just imagine being Mexican and trying to get one now in this country. So it was universally considered unjust, but I think most understood it.
Did he, do you know if he took any remedial action at any point later?
Who did?
The,
Otto Hahn?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. They talked later, but she understood. And Otto Hahn regretted it, but after the fact, she's like, I was in Hitler's Germany. I couldn't do much, I'm surprised I could communicate with you at all, probably.
Well, but there were enough cases where the man took the credit because he could, not because he had to. So.
Yes, and we'll kind of get to one of those a little later, by the way. So just to get some first, all of these women were stunning in the ground they broke. So she received a habilitation as a special kind of lectureship in Prussia. That it puts their ability to conduct high-level research and teaching. The first female university physics professor in all of Germany before she had to run. Second woman to get a doctorate at the University of Vienna. First and one of 2 non-Americans to get the Enrico Fermi Award. Some of you may know of Enrico Fermi. And first woman to get a chemical name named after her quite a few years later. So if you ever hear of Meitnerin, now you know why it's got that weird name. This is kind of cute. She was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Chemistry 19 and the Nobel Prize in Physics 19 times. 49 total nominations, which is a record. I have no idea why she didn't win any of them, but probably being Jewish had something to do with it. But she did go to the Nobel Laureates meeting by special invitation, so there were people who thought she should have had it.
A question you may have some idea on, might not. How important, my background's in physics, and working in physics is itself a pleasure, and discovering things and so forth. How important are the awards for these people?
I think in terms of getting a position or getting grants.
Yes, they're effective, for getting grants and things. But how about in terms of the notoriety of the fame?
Well,
Is that really...
I'm sure it does. Having never won one myself.
Yeah, but it could also be, there's a nuisance value in it too, because you're a celebrity suddenly, and that detracts from just the work you're hoping to do.
Yeah, a lot of them also get fixed on getting a second one.
Okay.
Yeah, Rolf Zinkernagel was just so damn fixated on it. He came up with the nuttiest damn theories later. So, yeah, and it does give ego.
And there is a financial incentive.
There is that. It does.
There is a prize.
Yeah, the prize is worth a lot. I don't know what it was like. I know it started at a pretty decent sum, but what we think was paltry, like $6,000, but it meant a lot more then. Last I knew it was $1 million.
Yeah, I think that's the last I heard too.
Currently, $1 million.
So, this is just, again, some of the honoraries. She got 6 honorary doctorates. I don't know how many institutions and the like hold her name. And Einstein himself referred to her as the German Marie Curie. So she was pretty well appreciated. These are just some awards she got. Max Planck, most of you know Planck. William Exner, Enrico Fermi Award, as I mentioned. This Leben Prize was completely new to me, but it's considered the Nobel Prize of Austria. And then they made her a Fellow of the Royal Society of London, which is not a place you find a lot of women back then. Now we get to the one where we talk about a left-out laureate here that I was mentioning earlier. Rosalind Franklin worked out a lot of the key properties of DNA. And, let's see if I can get this up here. discovered there were two forms of it, discovered how much water exactly was needed to make the molecule stable, worked out where the phosphate units will work. For those of you who've seen the usual twisted background, the sort of like straight lines that go on the outside, that represents the phosphate spine of it. So she worked that out. And this right here is probably the most important image in the history of science. As a biologist in my own career, I've seen that a zillion times. This took her, it's called Photo 51, took her this is the 51st photo she took trying to get this. She was the world's premier expert in crystallography. Nobody else could get this. I mean, nobody, and everybody was trying. Everything you want to know about the structure of DNA at the basic level is right in that thing. Don't ask me to read it. I was taught, but I can only remember bits and pieces. But this is looking down into the spiral, and you can sort of make out how it could come back out in 3D, and you'd see a lot of it. Well, it doesn't come out sideways. So here's what happened. Her findings were shown by basically her boss or supervisor, whatever you call it, showed it to Watson and Crick. She didn't know about this. So she didn't get any knowledge in the publications that followed. Should have received a Nobel Prize with them. However, there are some reasons. She died before it was presented. Nobody gets posthumous Nobel Prizes. Watson, out of Watson and Crick, did admit later that she should have been included for the award. And again, might have been had she not died before that. She died of radiation poisoning. X-ray crystallography unprotected is pretty dangerous. So she did go on after that and started working on the structure of RNA, poliovirus, and some plant viruses. Got them all. So she was amazing, and she was only 37 years old when she died. That's a lot to do when you're before you're 37. So Aaron Klug, who was one of her associates that was working when she died, did get a Nobel Prize for the work that she did on working out poliovirus structure. So basically she lost out on two of them, but because she was dead. So, after her death, I can't even count how many institutions and such, and awards and stuff I've heard with her name attached. It's all over the place. At least a dozen awards, at least a dozen institutions, and I'll wager it's a good deal more than that. Here's one of her sort of ideological follow-ons here, Dorothy Hodgkins, who also worked on molecular structures, used some X-ray crystallography, but knew by then not to just stand in the lab and let it go. So, as I said, you can see her work depended on Rosalind Franklin a lot. So they were still doing X-ray crystallography in the 90s, and I'm sure they're still doing it. So it's still similar. She became the 5th woman to win a Nobel Prize for determining the structure of vitamin B12. So as of 61 years after the start of the Nobel Prize, you can see there's 5 Nobel laureates. I think there was like 300, no, I don't know, 100, 300 men. She also worked on other important molecules you may have heard of. Insulin, penicillin, a steroid, all this while suffering rheumatoid arthritis in her hands and feet and raising 3 children. So, what do they say? If you want to beat a man, you've got to be 3 times as smart and work twice as hard. With the follow-on corollary, fortunately, this is not difficult. So, first and only British woman to win a Nobel Prize, again, I like to put there first, won the British Nobel, the Copley Medal, I have heard of that. Only female scientist to get the Royal Order of Merit. Oh, yeah. second woman and only female scientist up until the time that she got it. I'm sorry. How did I get 8 women received it? I guess some have gotten it since.
For things other than science.
Yeah. First fellow in chemistry at Oxford. First woman to get who she fought for paid maternity leave at Oxford. So she was the woman to both fight for it, get it, and be the first one to benefit from it. Also became Chancellor of the University of Bristol, Fellow of the Royal Society, and again, awards in some places that are named after her. I know that she got some awards over here in America, which is pretty incredible. She also traveled all over the world for invited lectures. Barbara McClintock follows on to those two. So she discovered what are called transposons. They are transposable genetic elements that basically present, it's sitting here in the entire genome, and it'll just jump to another place. When she first discovered it, everybody thought she was utterly bonkers. Managed to completely overturn the idea that it was fixed. Some were even hostile, but many just didn't understand what she was showing. I've seen one of her papers from back then, and it is extremely difficult to follow, and that's even given that I knew all of it was true and had learned some of it. So it is very complex primary research. But I love this. I never felt the need or desire to defend my views. If I turned out to be wrong, I just forgot I ever held it and went on. That's a scientist's view for you right there. Some of the awards and honors that she got. Over 15 major awards, including the Albert Lasker. If anybody's heard that, it's sometimes referred to as the Little Nobel. MacArthur Fellowship, another gigantic one. Part of the first class to get that. Received the National Medal of Sciences, first. Got a Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. And the only woman as of yet to receive an unshared Nobel Prize. All the others...
Oh, were shared with men, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, there we go. President of Genetics Society, elected to the National Academy of Sciences, loads of honorary degrees. And another quote of hers, might be unfair to get a reward for having so much pleasure over the years. There's another one who you sort of asked about the prestige of awards, and she was like, I'm just having a ball out here. Moving into a different area.
There's a line, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this.
Yes, exactly. So here's another one, Inga Lehmann. I don't think she won a Nobel, but we'll find out as we go through here. So she's the one who proved the Earth had a solid inner core and a molten outer core, which was kind of a bit different from what they thought at the time. Never mind that the seismic readings they already had weren't consistent with this idea. She went and analyzed them, figured out that there was a solid inner core and a molten outer core because that's what matched the data. Then discovered another region referred to as the inner outer cores between them, called the discontinuity, because it's a phase between solid and liquid. And 36 years after she did all these calculations, when computers were capable of it, they checked it. She didn't make a flaw. This is just another quote of how the Lehmann discontinuity was discovered through exacting scrutiny of records by a master of a black art, for which no amount of computerization is likely to be a complete substitute. This is just a little more about what she did. Leading researchers didn't accept it. But that little area there, the waves there were much weaker, and so everybody just kind of dismissed them. And she took the attitude of, it's data, don't dismiss it. Turns out they're significant. Charles Richter, if you know, the guy who came up with the Richter scale, was one of the first guys to look at that and go, you know what, she's right. So, let's give you some things she did.
So a man said it was okay, it must be okay.
Bless it.
Well, she already knew it was okay, but it is interesting that, yeah, it took the men a while to acknowledge, A, she's better at math than us, and B, we made a boo-boo. Which, now that I think of it as a guy who used to be married, why should that have surprised anybody? Don't we always make mistakes and the lives correct us? She looks. I hope I didn't cause a fight at home.
No, it'll happen here.
Good. Right, do we get tickets and refreshments?
There's some studies that kind of support that men are actually a bit better at physics than women at maths.
Ah, I had not heard that. Interesting.
I don't remember where. I can't substantiate that, but I remember that as being, I mean, not hugely, but actually substantially enough to be notable.
Well, that would explain why so many of the calculations required to send men to the moon and everything like that were actually done by women.
We won't get to that. I will point out that even though she never won any awards, my ex-wife was the one to work out the details of nuclear structure that she derived from little bitty tiny bits of data that had been largely dismissed. It was her professor who thought it meant something, but it was her who managed to. Or, I'm sorry, it was her professor that figured out that the little bits of data might mean something, but she did all the mathematics and programming to prove it. So, no, there she is. First chairperson of the Danish Geophysical Society, first chief of their Geodesic Institute, which she also was instrumental in getting that started and getting the funding for it. First president of the European Seismological Federation, first to get the William Bowie Medal, which I have heard of. I should note, she's Danish, really good at mathematics and finding little things. Odd note, my ex-wife is Danish. Maybe Danish women are really good at math.
She also has a good square jaw, which is kind of that determination to do it.
Yep. Well, my ex-wife had something like that. I called it the death stare.
Are you Danish?
I've got some Danish in me.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
From breakfast?
Nice. I do have the pierogi to Boston for tomorrow.
I saw that.
There were way too many Danish jokes I can make, including in the language, so it was fun to learn. So you should know how many incompetent men I had to contend with in vain. So there's the quote down there, you can appreciate that she had a lot of the males against her, and she just had to beat them over the head enough. Here's one that I had never heard of before until I just bumped across it, but this girl is fascinating. Taught herself geology, anatomy, paleontology, and scientific illustration. Discovered and correctly identified the first complete fossil of a dinosaur at age 12. Which she just wandered up and down this beach area, she and her sister, and her dad a lot of times, just looking for stuff. And they found that thing that she drew up there.
Which coast did she wander around?
A British coast. How's that for narrowing it down? I know that I saw the name of it, I just don't remember it.
Well, I was just thinking, children of all ages are just fascinated with dinosaurs, so it makes perfect sense that she did that at 12.
Yeah, and it helps that her father did have I can't remember, I think he was a paleontologist. So it did help to have that. And her sister loved it, so it was a family thing. Some of us just go to the beach to swim, they go to the beach to make scientific discoveries.
If you're in England, going to the beaches is the kind of pleasure that you think of when you go here.
You don't go swimming there.
No, you do.
Yep.
Oh, no, I do. No. You come out. I mean, I had this image. But there was one time there was this. She must have been 4 years old. She was coming back from a day from the beach, and she was like a Nordic warrior coming back. she had, survived. People do it, and it's every. I mean, people go on holiday, and every day they go down to the water and they swim, and it's cold, and it's.
My ex has taken a few dips in the North Sea. I don't.
More power to her.
I don't think I ever want to do that.
Well, there's something to be gained by doing it. They won. They. I mean, that was the kind of attitude that sustained them in World War II.
Yeah. Let me point this out. While she was still a teenager, she had paleontologists from Europe and America consulting with her for help identifying fossils. She also found the first complete fossil of a plesiosaur as opposed to an ichthyosaur. And I believe the plesiosaur is the one below, but I'm not certain. She also sometimes corrected errors by authorities of her era. She was still a little girl and was considered an authority by Darwin's friend and associate Charles Lyell and his mentor, Adam Sedgwick. I've heard of Lyell. Sedgwick was new to me.
She didn't live very long, did she? She didn't
No,
live very long.
48.
Yeah.
Of course, that other one was 105.
Yeah, well, of course, this is back then. Who knows what she might have died of,
And it
Scratch your
wasn't
finger on a dinosaur and, So, women were not allowed to join the Geological Society of London, so she was acknowledged posthumously when they started to allow the men. But they did do a little bit of something a little earlier. Immediately following her death, they made a stained glass window in her memory. I've seen a picture somewhere, but I couldn't find it again, so otherwise I'd have put it up here. And then let's say it was later that they let women in, and then they were like, "Yep, we declare her a honorary member." Dorset County, that's where she was. That's the
So she was
beach
down on the
area.
Dorset coast, which is southwest.
So the museum made her an honorary member, and in 2022 they put up a statue of her right near her home in Lyme Regis. So now anybody who knows their British, English geography has some idea where she was. I have none.
Southwest.
Hmm?
Southwest part. North of Cornwall. North of Cornwall.
Okay. So you mentioned the calculations for the moon. Here we are. Katherine Johnson. She made the calculations for putting astronauts in Earth orbit. She's known as a human computer because she could just do these calculations that staggered everybody else. And until the advent of computers, she was kind of like, the top, the best. Interesting thing, John Glenn was ready to go off into his famous rocket launch. The calculations at this point had been done by the IBM computers. But John said, have her check it. The hell with them computers, have her check it. If she says it's good, I'm go. So she also calculated parameters for Project Mercury, Apollo, shuttle program, and the ERS program. So otherwise Landsat. Here's the thing. She got out of high school at 14, went to West Virginia State, took every course in mathematics they had, and then her professor said, well, crap. So they made up new mathematics courses just for her. Graduated summa cum laude at 18 with degrees in mathematics and French. Got some brain power in this gal. First African American woman to attend graduate school at West Virginia U, and one of 3 African American students, the only woman, selected to integrate into that university's grad school. First woman in NASA's flight division to get credited as an author of a research report I went snooping around a little bit, and I could not find any woman who'd been credited on any report back at that time.
Do you know if she, I mean, did she go through this methodically, or was she able to do it at a kind of intuitive level?
Probably had some intuitive, but she did it methodically. She had to. It had to be.
That's why. So, I mean,
there's an intuitive understanding to be able to wrap your head around complex mathematics.
yeah.
Like,
Yes, no, I understand that, but I was just thinking, I mean, at some point you still have to go
Yes.
you still have to do the math.
do line by line.
Yeah. And she absolutely did. But she also
Knew which lines to use. I mean, it's kind of clear that, you know, when you develop a new approach in mathematics, you go line by line, but you're innovative at the same time. So
yeah. But yeah, I think again, she probably had the intuition as too. You know, you're looking at it.
At a certain point, you're able to say, okay, I can do these same 5 steps line by line by line, or I can go, okay, if I know step 1, I already know step 5, and kind of skip some of the middle ones, but that's the best that you could do.
Yeah. And she
Yeah.
probably had to write them down just so somebody else could look.
Yeah.
It's like, how'd you get from here to here? Oh,
yeah,
integration
that's
of parts.
that's what I meant. I mean,
Yeah.
it couldn't just be I mean, under pressure, you could do something, you know, really you could skip a lot of because you could do it in your head. But in a situation like that, you would have to be able to lay it out.
Yeah. The thing, under pressure, she was still the fastest. Because obviously she'd get that intuitive grasp, and then she just had to be sure to write in the steps.
Yeah.
So, but she was, you know, from what I was reading, she was blazingly fast. It was kind of like, yeah, the computer can do it faster, but she can do it plenty faster. We know exactly what she did every step of the way. 7 honorary PhDs, not bad for a black woman in the 50s and 60s. Number of awards she got: Congressional Gold Medal, presented by President Obama, and the Silver Snoopy Award, given by the astronauts for deserving members of non-astronaut staff. And what's his name? Buzz Aldrin, I know, was part of the group that did this. John Glenn probably was. And posthumously put into the National Women's Hall of Fame. There's 2 other people that must be mentioned in addition to her, Mary Jackson and Dorothy Vaughan, who were also part of this mathematics group and part of the critical development of early space programs. If you ever see this movie, if you have seen it, you know it's really good. Mm-hmm. If you haven't, Hidden Figures, movie about them. Historical accuracy for the movie, pretty dang good. So I always appreciate that. So just a little about Dorothy Vaughan. First African-American woman to be promoted to a supervisor in NASA. Also cum laude graduate in mathematics at 19. Taught herself and her staff programming languages. Headed the programming section at ACD and Langley.
What date are we talking about now? Where are we in history?
This is
well, her career ran from the 50s through, I think, early 90s, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, good, thanks. So, you know, the computer programming section, I know, couldn't have been in the 60s. I'm not sure when it came about. That might be more up your alley.
It was probably going to be in the 60s and 70s because supercomputers were already kicking off.
Oh, really?
You know, the
Yeah.
big rooms. The big rooms
yeah,
started
but
back in the
you're
50s.
talking punch cards in those days.
I remember those things.
His mother programmed with punch cards, so they were his toys.
Hope to God she never tripped.
Punch card.
You always numbered the cards in case you did trip.
Oh yeah, but still.
And there were
Where's
there
952?
were mechanical sorters in the early times.
Yeah, one of our instructors when we were getting our programming degrees was one of the guys who did work at NASA with the punch cards. And
Raoul?
yeah. They'd send the punch cards, you know, And the computer programmers were in one building, and so they put them all together. They'd ship them off. 2 to 3 days later, they'd get the results and then come back and debug it. Because, I mean, they literally had a little, little van that drove them off to the other sites to go run them through and see if they worked or not.
Oh man, to think we do that like that nowadays. It's amazing.
Well, punching, you actually had, depending on the support you got, you may have had to punch your cards. I mean, as a programmer, you were.
Oh yeah.
If you were doing corrections, you definitely did. You didn't, the whole deck might have been done by people who are professional key punchers, but if you're doing corrections to it or patches to it, you punched your own card.
Curtis, that was Curtis Rowell that we were talking about.
There were actually there was a little program, you had a card that you could put in a spool on the key punch that kind of did your numeric shifting and did your indexing for you. So even that level was kind of mechanized, but again, we're at a pretty low level of mechanization compared to now.
I do remember seeing the punch card machine, though. One of the guys in my high school who really got into programming, was very good at it, would go down to the local IBM place and do some work down there. So I went with him one time, and he's like, "Yeah, how you like this machine?" And I'm looking at it going, "Well, it's cool." This in my head, I'm like, "It's cool, but God, does this look like it's cumbersome?" But hey, when it's the 1970s and you're a high school kid working at IBM, not being paid, but that's pretty good for him. I just barely understood what the machine was for. So, also was raising 6 kids while she was doing this career, by the way. And she also got the Congressional Gold Medal. And here's Mary Jackson. You can see the gold medal down at the bottom. So all 3 of them got those. First black female engineer, also cum laude graduate from Hampton with, let's see, what is that? Degrees in math and physics. Had the most senior engineering title available at NASA. Became a manager for, Federal Women's Program, NASA Office of Equal Opportunity, and the Affirmative Action Program. So a pioneer not just in the mathematics and the space program, but also in sort of a national level of getting women and minorities more of a, protected or more opportunity. Influenced hiring and promotion of women at NASA in several areas. Got the gold medal. Well, continuing on in the world of space, but a little further out, here's a gal I learned about just as I was doing this. It's a person who figured out the composition of stars was mostly hydrogen. That didn't really go over well with most of the people at the time either, but too bad.
When was that discovery?
I'd say somewhere between 1900 and 1979.
No question about it, yeah. I'm thinking it was in the 60s.
I was going to say maybe the 50s, but that was just a guess.
I think in the 50s was when Hubble was working on his constants, and they didn't have it then, I know, so I'm guessing it was the 60s, but again, I'm sure I saw it in my readings, but I didn't.
Why would that have taken, I'm just puzzling at why that would have taken so long, because we had spectral analysis much earlier, and you would see from the stars, you would see in the spectral analysis of the stars, you would see hydrogen as being the dominant pattern.
You got me on that, but I haven't a clue. I mean,
because Hubble's much later in a way. I mean, in my head, Hubble would have been much later. Not just my.
And you may be right. I mean, I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Okay.
We've got a fair swath of people, and you as a physicist are more likely
to.
That
what I remember is limited.
1925 doctoral thesis that stars were composed primarily of hydrogen and helium.
So I was right. Yeah.
Okay,
was 1925.
Because that's what I was guessing was 20.
Well, thank
that was
you.
around. I mean, that was not so long after the the speed of light experiments with I can't remember the names. These two guys.
Which one?
In 1889, there was a question of the experiment with the speed of light going towards the sun and coming back.
Yeah. Didn't they?
That Einstein based his special theory on.
Okay.
So it's like 20, 25 years after that. It makes sense to me.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, Wikipedia.
It's like, nowadays you just... so, yeah, as I said, it overturned the view of the time. But she did all this as a grad student. I should have realized if I'd remembered that it would have been in the 20s.
All right.
So she didn't even have her degree yet. Pretty dang impressive. Again, first for this gal, got a PhD from Radcliffe College of Harvard, first professor at Harvard, department chair at Harvard, hold an endowed position in the astronomy department, director of the Harvard College Observatory, created for her, and she was again one who pushed for it, pushed to get the funding, and then got herself the position heading it up. And then she also did a lot of work on variable stars, which has been, some of us may have heard that if you've kind of heard Stephen Hawking or somebody like, or Neil deGrasse Tyson.
And sort of, this underlines the why the awards are useful is that you get from it. You had mentioned that before. That's kind of the crucial point. You can have an observatory built for you or a lab built for you.
Right. Yeah. If I go argue for it, it doesn't get anywhere. But
If you come in with the Nobel Prize, you're going to get it.
You're going to get it.
Right. Yeah. So Edelman, who's like my academic grandfather, if you will, who was a Nobel laureate, never had any trouble getting funding. I say academic grandfather because my advisor worked for him.
Yeah, the game of funding. I remember a story, this is in the 80s, of a mutual mathematics friend, and he had just been given a grant of $1 million to do whatever he wanted with it because he was deemed that creative.
A name will do too. Henrik Bohr, that I mentioned, did pretty well in getting funding in positions, but once everybody figured out that the name meant nothing and he was just decent, his funding kind of dried up. So, we've all heard of chaos theory. Mary Cartwright was one of the pioneers of it, particularly the butterfly effect, which, if anybody hasn't heard of it, that's the idea that a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and it leads to a hurricane in Kansas or something like that.
Why is this so-called chaos theory? I mean, it's dynamical systems, and it's actually the whole idea is that what we thought before was chaos was an order of a different order.
Yes.
But it's still the name chaos. Everybody seems to be in love with that because
it sounds cool.
I also think it's easy to grasp if you know nothing about, if you say nonlinear dynamics, people, what the hell? So, if you say chaos theory, then it's easy to explain that it's things that happen within a defined parameter, but we don't know exactly what happens inside that defined
Maybe
parameter.
it's a matter of, it's a theory about how we define chaos. So what looks like chaos
Find the
isn't.
order in
Yeah,
chaos.
that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think chaos theory is popular because it seems a little easier to grasp.
No, I think it's more that people like the idea of it's something out of control.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So she also solved some notable problems with radar in World War II. The signal amplifiers turned out to be erratic at certain wavelengths, which really just really bothered the radar operators, but they couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. She found the equation that would stabilize the signals at all wavelengths. There was more to it. I didn't keep track of it. To you, it would have probably meant a lot more about, the mathematics and the work she did. Again, another woman with some pretty impressive firsts. On the Council of the Royal Society, president of the Mathematical Association, president of the London Mathematical Society, got the Sylvester Medal, which is not one I'm familiar with, but it's the second highest award in mathematics. I guess that's after the Fields Medal. Yeah, awarded every 3 years. And got the De Morgan Medal, which is the highest award the London Mathematical Society presents.
Yeah, interestingly, the London when you're the president of the London Mathematical Society, that's an honorary position for 2 years. It's not it's an honorary position.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an award, yes.
Yeah. And again, first one. So, breaking ground. Here she is,
Yep.
your gal.
Our COBOL instructor back at college actually worked with her.
Wow.
So Joe and Joe Ruda was on a first name basis with Grace Hopper.
Cool.
Yep.
Nice, yeah. A gal I used to live with told me about her. She's was in the computing world since 80 or 81. And Grace Hopper is like her academic grandmother.
Yeah.
For herself.
I guess that sort of makes her from a computer science perspective.
For us, as for both
My
of us.
academic grandmother through Joe Ruda.
Cool. Fun to have connections, however tenuous, to people this awesome. So, pioneering computer programming. If you want to pitch in, please do.
Let's see what you go over first. I have a story if you don't put it up there.
The bug?
Yep.
It's in there.
All right. Because that's
Gal
one of the most
told me that, and I
famous.
thought it was the most fun story.
It is absolutely amazing.
Okay, so worked on the one of the first linkers or compilers. Again, for those of you who know anything about computing, you already know what these do, but basically translates written code into codes that the computers can read directly and operate on, I gather. And first to devise machine-independent learning programs, which you were also mentioning very much earlier. Yeah. So basically now we don't have to know every binary or machine language bit in order to program. Which that guy that was really smart in my high school, he did some programming in both binary and machine language. Described it to several of us, and we just thought that sounded like the most tedious thing ever. So, part of the team that made the UNIVAC, again, if you know computers, the first all-electronic digital computer. I don't think that's UNIVAC itself. I think that's a second model of some sort. Part of the team that found the first computer bug. Here you go, 1947. The computer was delivering inconsistent errors, so they went and dug around in the hardware and found a moth caught in one of the computer's relays.
And that's why they're all called computer bugs now.
So to this very day, if you have a bug,
it is because of a literal bug.
Yeah, that's it. Bug in the program. Yeah, it's a moth in your relay.
That was called a relay.
I thought you said this is the first electronic.
What's that?
Well, relays are they're electromechanical.
But yeah, I can still imagine the fun is digging around in vacuum tubes.
Yeah, they probably still
Electromechanical,
back then
yeah.
it would have been vacuum tubes.
Electronic
Oh, yeah.
transistor based, obviously.
Yeah.
So, getting some of her grace, amazing grace first, for those of you who know the silly ass pun I just made, or joke.
Again,
First
the
class
strong,
at the
the
Naval
strong
Institute.
jaw.
What?
This again, the strong jaw.
Yeah, yep. Apparently she was a really nice person, though.
Yes, she was.
Was not the
According
kind to
Joe.
give you the death stare. But the kind to probably be no nonsense. First in her class at Naval Reserve, first with a PhD at Yale, first to get the National Medal of Technology, which is this country's highest award. I see this guy nodding, he must be aware of that. That's you, Con. Anyway, first and only woman to be named a fellow of the British Computer Society as an American. Was the first person to get the Computer Sciences Man of the Year award, back before they bothered to have Women of the Year. Yeah. So, yeah, she got the, what was it, a joke on Saturday Night Live recently? First Man of the Year who got paid less award. First to be profiled twice for 60 Minutes and achieved the rank of Rear Admiral in the Navy Reserve. I don't think she was the first to hit that, but she was one of the very earliest. And shitloads of awards in places named after her.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a number, so I decided that was precise enough. Anybody recognize this individual? Knock the knockout there.
I want to say that's Hedy Lamarr.
You got it. Bingo. So, if you like your cell phone, you can thank the brilliant and beautiful, famous Hedy Lamarr. Nobody had any idea she had this many brains either.
That's because she's a very well-rounded individual.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so frequency hopping, technology known also as broad spectrum technology. It's the basis for all wireless technology that followed. So let's put her beauty and her brains were bombshells.
Well, I mean, there is a basis in genetics that beauty was the way that you got genetic selection. So beauty meant better genetics, and better genetics probably also corresponds to better intelligence. So,
But
Well, thank God I've got brains. Otherwise, I'd have nothing.
you snagged her.
Yeah.
but the definition of beauty has changed so much over the years. That's not.
Although I think if you
I
were to
don't-
put Hedy Lamarr walking down the street, she'd turn plenty of heads.
Now she would, but she might not have.
Not really, because she's probably in a casket.
Well, no, I said
But
it.
in the
Yeah.
1800s, she wouldn't have, because they like heavier women back then.
She was making her way up in the world of stardom in Austria,
Yeah.
and then she came over here, and she actually got noticed on the
Oh
boat
yeah.
on
no,
the way over.
Definitely during her time.
Yeah, well,
But to your
so point taken. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, that looks and what is considered attractive have changed so much over the years. I'm not sure that has a whole lot to do.
Has that been that variable? in terms of
Yeah,
acceptance?
I can only say that in the '60s when I was growing up, I'd
Oh,
see
gosh,
movies
yes.
with her and just went,
No, but we're talking about like millennia, let's say.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
if you
oh
have
yeah.
descriptions or pictures of
If you look at Rubenesque beauties, they're all people found that being a rounder female body meant that you were more likely
right,
to be
the
able
face,
to.
there would still be beauty in the
healthy.
face. That was-
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's parts of Africa where they like fat women
Mhm.
because that means they have access to plenty of food.
Yeah. So it's just I'm not sure
Might not be. Yeah.
about the correlation
Right.
between attractiveness and being genetically better, because
And there's
that would be
again,
that would be the only way
Yeah.
that DNA could do selection. That would be progressive.
it's an interesting question though.
yeah,
I just don't know that.
and again it puts the nature and nurture thing too. We're talking about mathematical and engineering brilliance and beauty. I mean, my ex-wife is a gorgeous woman, was whatever, but she also had a home setting where her father became the principal of a school. His father was the principal of the school. Her mother had a master's degree in mathematics.
Yep.
So
you had the foundation was there too.
yeah,
It-
great.
that could also be
inheritance as well as a great.
It makes me smile a little bit. It reminds me of a story about our kids. So we have two sons, and his mother looks at one of our boys and says, "You've got Tad's jaw," looking at him.
Mhm.
And his father says, "We bought Tad's jaw." So yeah.
You didn't even know your jaw was on the market, did you?
Actually, I did. I
You did.
had a lot of expensive dental work around the ages of 12 to 16.
So yeah,
Sugar diet.
there's some affluence to being attractive as well, because you can
make it now.
but not being exposed to smallpox, not having to do.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's Edward Jenner's time.
Mhm.
One of the things that led him to cowpox, which was the original vaccination, was that the milkmaids of the whole area were known for their beauty because they never got smallpox.
Yep.
Occasionally they'd have like a little pox on the hand, but that was it. And he thought, wow, that's a great idea, so he started giving people cowpox. Hence also vaccination, vacca being Latin for cow. These things you find out when you're a congenital scientist. Plus, that's my field. My specifics were immunology, and Jenner's definitely one of our fathers. So, frequency hopping, she made it so that it was possible to guide torpedoes remotely. They used to have to deal with a little wire connected, very clumsy. The Navy refused to take the technology because it was too big. No, size of a watch. These are objections they made. It was too big. It's the size of a watch. It's too hard to operate. It's plug and play. It was made by a woman. Well, yeah, that sunk it. Interesting point. Because they did sink it like that, it didn't start to become part of it until I think it's about 48. By which time thousands and thousands of lives in the Navy had been lost that never would have been, if not for the assholes in the Admiralty. This is the chair of the branding at the business school in Paris, and a fellow at Harvard who said, speaking of her,
Yep.
a powerful lady who's sexy but smart is really scary for most
Yep.
guys. And you're saying it, I know.
Yep.
My ex said the same sort of thing. So, getting one last bit here, the laureate lag that I had sort of alluded to somewhat earlier. Whoops. So, Nobel Prizes have been presented for 120 years. That's how women have fared up until, I think this was 2021 or 2, the last I updated this. Nobel Prize area, physiology, women 12 out of 225. That's the list of the women who got them. Chemistry.
The problem is there's a twofold question. One is recognition, but the other is availability of education. And that would be, I would assume that the biggest sort of funnel point, the biggest restriction would have been the availability of education.
I may have it in the next slide, but part of it was they had to come along and get enough education. Second, there had to be enough of them. But the other thing is that the presenting committees are made of pretty much all men.
Well, on top of that, we still see this in IT as well, that there is a hostility to women being in the field, so women don't go into it, or the ones that do go into it get pushed out. So
There's still a hostility in the field?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
IT has a significant sexism problem.
I had no idea that, I love being clueless. I didn't realize I was suffering from it until Hillary Clinton was running for president. Because I like being clueless, but I would sit and try and I'm a manager in IT at this point. I'm trying to offer suggestions, and I'm being talked over all the time and interrupted all the time. There's a guy that I worked with, complete asshole, by the way, but even he recognized that I wasn't able to get a word in edgewise, because he actually, Chris, actually
That's
ran.
even now.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's sad. I thought it would have improved.
No.
Well, it may have. It probably has improved. That's the
But
bad
it's-
news.
It is improved.
It's
yeah.
gone from catastrophic to extremely tragic, which is not really much of an improvement.
It's moving in the right way, but it's got to get
When
some
they
more
see it as
momentum.
I did, it's just a double standard is really what it is.
Yeah.
Is that they see us as being able to do the soft skills and
Get coffee.
and team leads.
Well,
We're
it's-
good for team leads because we can like work with our programmers and kind of make them feel at home. We're good for bringing in the cake and managing the birthday parties.
Oh, you should talk about when you guys
No,
interviewed Bruce.
it's,
I worked in a computer department in the 70s.
Right.
And this was it started out as a class because they had their own language, and I think it was split, men and women.
Right,
I
and
think
once it became popular and started taking off, it moved away from women to a male-dominated field, and it stayed that way since basically the mid to late 70s.
I see. So in the beginning, it was actually more balanced.
Yes.
Yeah, his mother
My
My
started
mother was a
that.
computer programmer.
All right.
yeah,
Okay.
and I may get to that.
But we had managers
Some-
and I mean everything.
Yeah.
I sometimes forget exactly which slides I kept in,
But
but
to
I got.
give you, I'm going to finish
Go
this
ahead.
because you brought it up. When I interviewed for my job, now I'm still at the same company.
Oh,
Been
no, I
there-
meant when you interviewed my friend Bruce, and he mistook you for not being in the IT department.
Oh God, yes.
And that was only a few
thought
years
you were.
ago.
I thought you were talking
No,
about
that's-
Bruce asking if I would
actually
dance
worse.
on the table during my interview.
That's a
Yeah.
surprise.
That really
But if
happened.
it's
By the
gotten
way.
worse, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
Were you
Okay.
wearing too
That
short a
works.
skirt or something?
No,
Just to
no,
show that
no.
you were-
He's just a HR moment waiting to happen, and he was trying to screw with the male team leads and say, "I'm going to ask her if she can do this." And I'm from New York, so I'm pretty rough and tumble and stuff like that. He's like, "I was going to ask you this," and they were terrified. And I was like, "Well, I would have asked you to join me." I had the job after that. But he's right. He had a friend, Bruce, that he had known for years, and we were interviewing for a guy to do machine learning simulation and things like that. And he came in for that interview. And I met him because, I knew the guy. I had talked to him. And he had no idea that I was on the interviewing team. He just thought that I worked at U.S. Express in some...
And you were the HR person.
Yeah. And...
Somewhat more to the positive, where you're saying places are working. My ex-wife, when she was in the physics department, there were a total of 3 gals in the department. All of the professors, and they were all male at the time, all of them were actually very in favor of them. They wanted them there. They would actively, if they knew somebody as an undergrad who was good, they would say, "Hey, please, apply to grad school. We want more of you." Interesting thing, all 3 of those females wound up in the office of the department head saying, "I don't think I'm good enough to be here." And every time Dr. Garcia was like, "The reason we put you in here was because you qualify. You are plenty good enough to be here." In fact, all 3 of them were, higher up in the rank, in the intellectual rankings than many of the others, and they recognized that, but they wanted them in there. They pushed them and encouraged them. And
this goes back to your environmental question earlier, right? So for a woman to succeed in STEM, she's got to really want it.
yeah,
And
You mean damn the torpedoes kind of.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So all things being equal, if you and I are intellectually on the same level, if we have the same experience and all that sort of stuff,
That's not going to be enough.
it's you had doors open for you. I had doors closed. So if we get to the same point,
yeah,
you're going to want the
yeah.
woman because she had to push her way through a few more
You
obstacles.
see that with blacks too. I mean,
Exactly.
it's like-
I actually got into an argument with a friend of mine who's a sociologist and stuff, all about all of this. He was trying to argue for doing away with affirmative action, and I said, well, no, all things being equal, if you have 2 candidates who are equal, but one of them had more adversity to get there, that's the one I want, because that's the one who's going to fight for it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that also making, you mentioned A, clueless, B, New York, rough and tumble, great combination.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And I told you my ex-wife had a death stare.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, I've never figured out. She's 5'2", 105 pounds, cute, beautiful, And I've literally seen her stare down guys that are over 6 feet tall with big builds. And they're just kind of like, I don't know how she does the death stare, but she'll hit them with it. And they're just kind of like, okay, the argument's over. So that probably was what helped her the most.
It does.
So
yeah, this thing about, I mentioned before, this background difference between this woman who's a mathematician and myself. My parents were not physicists and librarians. And I think that for me, the affirmative action, there's another angle to the affirmative action, and that is that because I didn't have the background, I didn't have the resources. And if you put somebody, this is the opposite situation. If you put somebody in a position where they're not qualified, their kids will be qualified, and that's where the chasm lies. That
It's
you have
all
to cross
about
that.
opening the doors and giving them the opportunity to grow into that position.
But
So-
it may actually be a generational thing. They may not be able to do it because of their background, but they can provide then, once they've
Yeah.
taken that step, they can
Yeah.
provide the background. Yes. Yeah. We're not in disagreement at all. Preaching to the choir.
move along a little. Also, so you can see the numbers here: 12 out of 225, 8 out of 199, 4 out of 220.
So we've got to close the doors just a little tighter.
You almost got them. Stand in the way and push them. They're mostly smaller and weaker.
Well, the mathematician in me will wonder what proportion of people who, say, went into physics are female. So, like, if only 2% of physicists are female and 2% of the Nobel Prizes went to women,
It correlates.
then that would make sense. But I suspect there was a lot more female physicists
Yeah.
proportionally.
Well, there's a little bit of a, excuse me, there's
I
a little bit of an
suspect, but I don't know.
uptick.
I would suspect that there are there's a lot more women who get the Nobel Prize of physicists than there are of men who get, because the one who get forward are the ones that are really passionate.
Yeah.
And there is a slight trend going of more
Yeah, you
women
can just see it by
starting
looking
to
at the
get
years
them
and all
as
that.
you move from the 60s, 70s. You start to see a little bit more, but of course Nobel Prizes is so rare that it's not going to be a really obvious increase, but it is
I'm
there.
really shocked that situation in computing has gotten worse.
So here's where it's just putting the
Oh, yeah.
numbers alone don't tell the whole story, and this is where I get to some of the things that we were talking about. Very few people can nominate candidates. The nominators have to be widely recognized, top level authorities in their respective sciences, approved by the Nobel Committee before they can be, a nominator. And the Nobel laureates are, of course, favored by nominators.
And you always want to nominate someone who looks just like you.
Yeah, well, and then there's connections. But yes, you're right. So here's the thing. There aren't as many women as men in the top tiers of research, so there are not that many to be candidates, and creates a preponderance of male nominators and therefore male nominees. Fortunately, times are changing.
Well, but they can change from what you're saying. They change and change back.
Yeah. There's something about the lag across disciplines. Proportion of women in the sciences varies a lot between the disciplines. You can see the increasing numbers by the time you get to biology, which is a nice squishy science that we can fudge around a lot more than those hard numerical sciences like physics.
Well, I've got more going on too, because there's more women who are pursuing higher education than men now.
Yes, I think I have that in here.
Yeah.
How's the politics, the current
Proportion
politics
of women is
affecting
increasing a little.
How's Trump affecting all this?
If you look at the numbers, there's some variability there, but look at, it goes from 2000 to 2010. In engineering, it went from 10% to about 15%. So the trend is increasing.
Have you noticed the difference since 2016? Has Trump influenced this being true?
Trump has more influenced women going into politics. I
No,
think.
but this is a whole culture change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I don't.
I don't know how much of that has to do with Trump. though.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about what's going on in the world of like academia and who's getting in right now. I'm
But-
out of touch with that for a long time.
But they're talking about, with some of that pushback that we're getting from the right now has to do with the fact that more women are actually going to college and getting advanced degrees than men. So women are continuing to move forward and to progress,
And men aren't.
and
Men
men
are falling behind.
and that they're getting resentful of that because they are challenged by intelligent, successful women.
Yeah.
We're just intelligent.
Which is really, I only know this as a fact because my mother, who was a nurse, she didn't get a doctor's degree because she got her nursing in the 50s, and back then it was very, very rare and hard. But she should have. My mother should have gotten it. She should have gotten one. She overrode doctors, literally. And if they wouldn't listen to her, she'd just call the department heads that knew her and override them that way. She was truly one of the smartest people I've ever known. So I grew up with this woman as my mother. I never thought that women were any different from men. I'm like, they're every bit as smart. Look at her. She worked with a couple of, what was the little novella, I just blinked, at the Lasker. She worked with a couple of Lasker Award winners who knew her personally, and they really took her reviews and reports with a tremendous amount of seriousness because they knew how good
It
she
wasn't
was.
just that she was that smart and that productive. It was that she had actually got to a role that you could see her doing that. Because if she had just been a housewife and been that smart and that productive, she wouldn't have been a role model in the same way.
Yeah.
It's just the reality.
And to be fair, to step back to that conversation about my realizing that I was treated differently than my male managers, co-managers, our director grew up on Sand Mountain in Alabama.
Backwoods Alabama.
Okay.
If Alabama could get any more backwoods.
He went to church 3 days a week.
Only, right.
Right. So 3 days a week. Really sweet guy. But he had a problem with women in IT. And that was
He had a problem
really...
with women, not just...
Yeah. His
Probably.
wife was a housewife. And
obedient.
And obedient and stuff like that. So that had something to do with it. It wasn't just because whatever, but the people that I work with in Southeast Tennessee were a little backwoods.
Yeah.
So-
I had a fortunate
Thank
upbringing. I had a fortunate upbringing in having a really intelligent
Yeah.
mom. My dad was very happy with that. They were both in the early civil rights movement, so I didn't grow up with racial bigotry either.
Yeah.
So it's like, my friends are black, brown, whatever, but that's just like my eyes are brown and somebody else's are blue. It's all it meant to me.
His mother was really freaking intelligent.
Yeah, it's also part of the reason why I married the woman I did. A lot of the other women I couldn't stand. I don't care how gorgeous you are, if there ain't nothing in here. So I mentioned the lag is increasing. There are significant increases in the number of women over the last 50 years, and you were mentioning the numbers are going like that. Particularly in the field I was in biology, we probably had 50% women running around our grad department, and I don't remember a soul, professor or other student, that I ever heard say a bad thing about any of them.
They don't anymore.
No, we totally respected them.
So when I was in physics in university, there was I think a woman joined the class for a short time, and that was it. It was all men.
Yeah. So more women are getting in there than ever, and that means more women are getting into the top tiers in significant numbers, and that means in time we should start seeing ever-increasing diversity in the Nobel Prizes.
But they'll only get 730,000 instead of 1 million. Sorry, joke.
So again, dovetailing into a lot of what we've said here, time will tell. Old prejudices die hard, but they're dying. Takes time to reach the top levels, but more women are getting there. Childbearing, birthing, and raising takes up a lot of time, but organizations are working to accommodate it in various ways. And men are starting to take a little bit more of a role in this, albeit ridiculously slowly. For the future, time will tell. Let's see that.
All right.
I really loved all the input. Really,
Thanks, Mike.
it went well.
Thank you.